Hey guys, it's Nicole, and today's video is going to continue through the free sketches from Scrapbook Generations Create magazine. I believe this one is the double page sketch from the February 2014 edition or issue, and like I mentioned in a previous video, I'll post a link below of where you can find the sketches as well as these magazines, because they are still up and available to open or download and read through them, and they're usually, I want to say that they were 200 to 300 pages each, and from what I remember, like each issue would have a different manufacturer that their design team would participate with the sketches, and you got kind of a behind the scenes look at maybe how Doodlebug started, or Fancy Pants, different companies like that. And then there was always a section in the back that was my favorite, which was the readers gallery, where it was all submissions from people who read the magazine, and they would put in one of the pages, like they would have information as far as, like, you know, play along with the sketch, and you could submit your layout, and then if you got picked, then you were in the readers gallery for like the next issue. And I always liked looking at those because it was sort of the everyday scrapbookers version of the sketches, and not necessarily like people on a design team. So that was always fun for me, particularly with the magazine. So for this sketch, I had already picked photos from Valentine's Day of this year, and we don't do a whole lot for Valentine's Day. I usually just get a couple things for my kids and a little gift bag, and they just kind of open it, and it's usually a little bit of candy, something to do, maybe a little toy, that kind of thing. And so I knew that I didn't have a ton of photos, and I felt like the orientation of the photos that I did have was going to work with the sketch. And like I'm sure you saw at the beginning of the video, I have a tendency to pull way more things than I will actually use. And 9 times out of 10, it's because I get distracted and I forget. Like, I had intended to use those super old sticky back buttons, and I just didn't get around to it. And it didn't even occur to me later towards the end of the layout when I was looking for like circular type things. Completely spaced it. Same thing with those heart punches. I had wanted to use them to replace on the sketch where they have 3 small square photos on the right hand page right there. I was going to replace that with some punched out or die cut hearts with pattern paper and sort of embellish them and stuff. And for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. And I think it's because I have a tendency to scrap in sort of a start-stop fashion, where like the first video clip I did on like the 25th of October, and then I didn't finish the layout until probably Halloween. So there was a good 5 or 6 days between when I had gotten like my paper elements down and then when I came back to actually complete the layout. And that's pretty typical for me. I mean, sometimes it works out, and then sometimes like later I'll go back to edit the video and I'm like, dang it, I had all that cute stuff picked out, I had a plan, and then I don't know what happened. And it's probably just because, you know, I sit down and I get going, and then somebody's coming and asking me for something, and somebody's calling, or I need to respond to an email or get something back to somebody for work or whatnot, and it's just like, dang it, I feel like at this point I'm starting to train myself into like adult ADD. And that's usually why, like, if you see when I make myself notes or like a rough sketch on a post-it note, I will usually write down those things that I want to do so that I will go back and look at them. And I will typically go back and look at that little note sheet because that's where I write down the date for my photos. And typically the last thing that I do on a layout is I'll put the date. So I'm usually looking for that paper towards the end. Not sure what happened this time. I did stick pretty close to the sketch. Instead of doing, like, they had some stripe border strips, I wanted to use up some of these super old Doodlebug paper frill things, and then I felt like it just still looked a little plain, so I trimmed some super thin blue pattern paper just to kind of break that up a little bit. And then so this was when I had come back, 5 or 6 days later to try and finish this up and figure out where I was going with it. And for whatever reason, it seems like the first couple sketches that I'm doing off of these, the ones from the Create magazine, I keep finding myself sticking really close to the sketch, which is fine. But typically when I work through something like this, there's always a handful of them where I will do a pretty big modifying of the sketch. And it hasn't happened yet, so I'm not sure if it's just because I haven't had a good chunk of time where I'm scrapbooking regularly and sort of creativity is going and other options are sort of popping up into my head. I think right now I'm just sort of clocking in, getting it done, clocking out type of a thing, and slowly working my way through the sketches. I know, like, I've done their photo arrangement replay class, whatever it's called. We had worked through that one on the board years ago, and I think I hosted it. And that was some of my favorite layouts because I did modify them and I did kind of do my own thing. So I don't know. I feel like sometimes it's either the mood I'm in or the time I have or the level of distractions kind of bases itself on how far, I guess, I will deviate from the sketch. When I got done with this one, I did kind of feel like it was a little plain, but I was done with it and I didn't really feel like adding anything was going to sort of change that feeling to me. But I was okay with it. I feel like for us, Valentine's Day isn't really any more than these 5 or 6 photos. We don't really do a whole lot. So it's not like a super special occasion that I would normally want to spend a little bit more time on the layout with, which is probably weird. I don't know. I kind of feel like at this point I'm just random with why I do things and explaining why I do things. And there's a couple people that I still pretty regularly watch on YouTube, and I'm like, I kind of wish that I could get into more of a rhythm of what my style is, or maybe I do the same thing all the time like them. And then reality sets in and I realize, no, that's not going to work because I can't focus. I can't sort of stay on track. I kind of just do things when I can, how I can, and that seems to work for me. When I was pulling supplies, I didn't really have like a Valentine's Day collection. So I just went through my stash and pulled things that were like pink, red, and blue. Ooh, excuse me. And so I had grabbed some really old papers from my mind's eye. I think all the die cuts and stuff were from like a love theme Simple Stories Snap collection. And I took this notebook die from My Favorite Things and die cut it just to give it a little bit more interest so it wasn't just sort of this 3x4 card just kind of hanging out. I wanted it to look more like a pre-made embellishment. So I just picked ones that I felt like either the words didn't clash or what was printed on them would kind of work orientation-wise. And then this was when I figured out that I kind of wanted to include some sort of circular elements to kind of break up how much I've got going on as far as very heavy like squares and rectangles. So the circle embellishment that I was putting on foam is really old from Chic Tags. I don't even know if they're still around. I haven't looked. I had grabbed a bunch of them during like a big clearance sale. And then when I was digging through stuff, I found my wooden veneer potty people, which I was very excited about. I haven't seen them in forever, and they were sort of just in this drawer where I had been throwing open random embellishments into. So I grabbed 2 of the little ones. And then the sketch, I believe, had some sort of short squatty banners over on the upper left, so I just decided to go ahead and go with that because I wasn't really sure. This was kind of where I sort of lost my game plan of what I was going, so I just kept going with what was suggested on the actual sketch. And I believe right now I'm probably looking for a third. I was trying to find a third pattern paper, and I think because I'm so used to working within a collection where you kind of have unlimited amounts of papers that you know coordinate together and will work, that when I just pulled randomly from my stash, I was having to really kind of go looking for stuff that would match. And especially when I'm using sort of just tone on tone papers, that's not really an issue with matching. But then when I'm throwing in like the snap cards and stuff that do have colors on them, I was sort of trying to stay with those. So eventually I nixed the idea of even bothering to keep looking through my pattern papers, and I just decided, you know what? I have all these 3x4 cards. I'm just going to cut one down and make it into a banner anyways. So that was what I went with. And so I just picked one that had a little pink camera with a red heart. I felt like the colors didn't clash, and it had the notebook paper in the background, which was kind of going along with some of the other elements that I was using on the page. And notebook paper is one of those patterns that I love using. I like it for journaling. I like it for stamping phrases and stuff like that. Like, if I totally could have, on the right where it says "you are so loved," instead of using that, I could have just die cut it out of notebook paper and grabbed my stamps and kind of made my own, which I've done before. And that's one of my favorite things. That's kind of why I try to keep like 6x6 notebook patterns on hand, or like grid paper, stuff like that, because it is one of those go-to supplies that I like to use. So it didn't surprise me that when I was going through the 3x4 cards that the camera with the notebook paper was sort of the one that I ended up going with. And then I have set aside, like I said, I took some notebook paper and that same notebook die from My Favorite Things, and I'm going to use that to do my journaling. So I just type up my journaling on my computer. I will typically center it and then just change my paper, like not my paper width, but the width of where the text is, to be smaller than what I'm printing it on. So in this case, I was printing it on a 3-inch wide card, so I just made sure that my text was, 2.5 to 2 3/4 width, didn't go past that. And then I will typically print it out, hope I get lucky that it fits within the lines, and if it doesn't, that's when I go back and start playing with the line spacing. And a lot of times I'll print it out on the same paper a couple times, and I'll just hold it up to the window because it's pretty much brighter than like my computer screen, and it's easier than holding it up to a lamp or something. And I'll just use the window to line up my printing on the die cut card and then just run it back through with some washi tape holding it in place. And I ended up just getting some circle stickers. Those little label pieces were from the Chic tags, and added my date with a stamp, and then just some enamel dots here and there to kind of go with that circular element that I wanted to add. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.